Welcome to the latest Mango Report. What does AI owe us? I have been thinking about that question for months. And the more I think about it, the more I realize it is not one question, but three questions. Does AI, as a technology, as a set of systems, have obligations to protect and respect the people it impacts? Do AI creators have an obligation to ensure technology promotes holistic human flourishing rather than just financial profit? And do we, as citizens, as workers, as communities, have an obligation to each other to govern this technology in the public interest, even when doing so is difficult and slow and politically contentious? Those three questions are not the same question, but they are all versions of the same underlying problem. We have built something enormously powerful, and we have not yet agreed on what it is for. This is episode 5 of the Intelligence Without a Human Anatomy series. It is the hardest episode I have written. I do not have clean answers. What I have is a framework for thinking, and a conviction that thinking clearly about this, right now, is one of the most important things any of us can do. What does AI owe us? Previously in episodes 1 to 4, we established that intelligence does not require human anatomy. We traced it through biology, through the enterprise economy, and through our cultural fears. We argued that the real risk of AI is not a monster with intentions, it is a mirror that reflects and scales the values, biases, and priorities of the people who build and deploy it. Today we ask the hardest question of the series. Given all of that, what does this technology owe the people it affects? Section 1. Why this question is harder than it looks. The reason this question is harder than it looks is that our existing frameworks for obligation, legal, moral, economic, were built around human actors. And AI is not a human actor. When a doctor makes a mistake, we have malpractice law. When a company defrauds its customers, we have consumer protection law. When an employer discriminates in hiring, we have civil rights law. These frameworks all assume a human being, or a human institution, making a decision, and being held accountable for that decision. But when an AI system makes a hiring decision, or a credit decision, or a bail recommendation, or a medical diagnosis, who made the decision? The engineer who wrote the algorithm? The company that deployed it? The data that trained it? The objective that was specified by someone, somewhere, when the system was first designed? We have systems making consequential decisions about people's lives, and the chain of accountability is so diffuse that in practice, no one is accountable. This is not an accident. It is, in many cases, a feature rather than a bug, from the perspective of the institutions deploying these systems. Diffuse accountability is commercially convenient. If no single person made the decision, no single person can be sued for it. If the algorithm decided, the algorithm cannot be cross-examined. Legal systems around the world are still working out how to handle this. The EU's AI Act is the most ambitious attempt so far. It imposes obligations on AI developers and deployers based on the risk level of their systems. But it is new, it is still being implemented, and it covers only one jurisdiction. The United States has no comparable federal framework. The patchwork of existing laws, employment discrimination law, consumer finance law, healthcare privacy law, were not designed with AI in mind and create significant gaps. So when I ask what AI owes us, I am partly asking a legal question: what obligations should be codified in law? But I am also asking something deeper. Because law follows culture. And culture is shaped by the stories we tell and the values we hold. Section 2. 3 frameworks for thinking about AI obligation. I want to offer you 3 frameworks for thinking about what AI owes us. They come from different intellectual traditions. They reach different conclusions. And I think all three of them contain something important. Framework 1. The consequentialist view. Consequentialist. AI owes us outcomes. Specifically, outcomes that on balance improve human welfare. The obligation is not procedural. It is not about how decisions are made. It is about whether the results are good. By this view, a hiring algorithm that produces more equitable outcomes than human hiring managers is doing its job, even if it operates as a black box. A medical AI that catches more cancers than human radiologists is fulfilling its obligation, even if no one can fully explain why it works. There is something genuinely appealing about this view. It is outcome-focused in a world where outcomes matter enormously. It does not fetishize process. And it acknowledges that the status quo, human decision-making, is itself deeply imperfect and often deeply unfair. But it has a serious problem. When something goes wrong, when the algorithm produces a harmful outcome, consequentialism gives us no clear path to correction. If we cannot see inside the system, we cannot know whether the harm was a correctable error or a structural feature. And without that knowledge, we cannot fix it. Framework 2. The deontological view. Deontological AI as process. Regardless of outcomes, people have a right to know that decisions affecting their lives were made through fair, transparent, explainable processes. By this view, a black box algorithm is ethically impermissible, even if it produces good outcomes, because it violates the fundamental dignity of the people it affects. People have a right to understand why a decision was made about them. They have a right to contest it. They have a right to human review. This view is the philosophical foundation of the EU's AI Act and of most civil liberties arguments about algorithmic decision-making. It takes seriously the idea that how we treat people matters independently of what happens to them. But it also has problems. Transparency requirements may conflict with performance. The most accurate AI systems are often the least explainable. Requiring human review may slow systems down in ways that reduce their benefits. And in some domains, say real-time fraud detection, the requirement for human review may be practically impossible. Framework 3. The relational view. Relational AI owes us participation. The obligation is not just to produce good outcomes or fair processes. It is to include the people most affected by AI systems in the decisions about how those systems are built, what they optimize for, and how they are governed. By this view, the deepest problem with AI deployment is not technical. It is democratic. The people whose lives are most shaped by these systems have had the least voice in designing them. This view draws on traditions of participatory democracy, community organizing, and indigenous governance, traditions that argue that legitimacy comes not just from good outcomes or fair rules, but from genuine inclusion in the decision-making process. Its challenge is practical. How do you include millions of affected people in highly technical decisions that require specialized knowledge to evaluate? How do you prevent participation from becoming a performative checkbox rather than a genuine exercise of power? These three frameworks are not mutually exclusive. The most defensible position probably draws on all three: outcomes matter, process matters, and participation matters. The hard work is figuring out how to weight them when they conflict. And they do conflict. Constantly. In the real decisions being made right now about how AI systems are designed, deployed, and governed. Section 3. The questions we are not asking. I want to be honest about something. The frameworks I just described, consequentialism, deontology, the relational view, these are not the frameworks being used to make decisions about AI right now. The framework being used right now is simpler: what maximizes return on investment, within the constraints of what is currently legally required. That is not a criticism. It is a description. Companies exist to generate returns. They operate within legal constraints. They respond to market incentives. This is how capitalism works. And it is not inherently malicious. But it means that the questions I have been describing, about obligation, about accountability, about participation, are not being asked inside the organizations making the most consequential deployment decisions. They are being asked, sometimes by regulators, occasionally by ethics boards, more often by journalists and researchers and civil society organizations that have no seat at the table where the actual decisions are made. Here are the specific questions that are not being asked loudly enough, in the places where they most need to be heard. When an AI system makes a decision that harms someone, who is responsible and what is the remedy? When AI-driven efficiency gains eliminate categories of work, who captures the economic value of those gains, and what obligation exists to the workers displaced? When AI systems are trained on data generated by communities that had no say in how that data would be used, what is owed to those communities? When AI systems perform differently across demographic groups, better for some, worse for others, what standard of equity applies, and who enforces it? When the cumulative effect of many individually reasonable AI deployments is a labor market that no institution is prepared to govern, who is responsible for governing it? None of these questions have clean answers. All of them are being partially answered, by default, by inaction, by the accumulation of individual deployment decisions, made without a shared framework. That is the governance gap I described in episode 3. It is not a gap in our technical capability. It is a gap in our collective will to have the hard conversation. Section 4. What obligation actually looks like. I want to spend the last part of this episode talking about what obligation actually looks like in practice. Not in theory. Not in philosophy. In the decisions that real people and real institutions could make, right now, if they chose to. For the companies building and deploying AI, obligation looks like this. It looks like investing in pre-deployment auditing as seriously as you invest in pre-deployment testing. Not just, does this system work? But, who does it work for, and who does it fail? At what rate? In what contexts? And what do those failure patterns tell us about what the system has learned to optimize for? It looks like meaningful transparency, not the performative publication of a model card that no one reads, but genuine investment in helping affected communities understand how systems that affect them work. In language they can engage with, in forums where they can respond. It looks like building redress mechanisms before you need them. Not waiting for a lawsuit or a regulatory action to create a process for people to challenge decisions made about them by AI systems. Building that process from the start, as a design principle rather than a legal requirement. For governments and regulators, obligation looks like this. It looks like investing in the technical capacity to actually evaluate AI systems. Not just read documentation from the companies that built them, but independently assess what those systems do, how they fail, and who bears the cost of those failures. Right now, the knowledge asymmetry between regulators and industry is vast. Closing that gap is not optional if meaningful oversight is the goal. It looks like taking the labor question seriously before the crisis, not after. The history of technological transitions suggests that the costs fall hardest on the people least able to absorb them, and the benefits flow most readily to those already advantaged. Governing that dynamic requires policy choices about taxation, about education, about social insurance, that are difficult and politically contentious. They are also unavoidable. And for us, for citizens, for workers, for communities, obligation looks like this. It looks like paying attention. Not to the AI story that is loudest or most dramatic, but to the AI that is already making decisions about your life. The algorithm that scored your credit application. The system that ranks your resume. The model that influenced your insurance premium, or your bail conditions, or the ads that shape what information you saw during an election. It looks like demanding that the institutions we have built to represent our collective interests, governments, unions, professional associations, universities, take this seriously enough to develop genuine expertise. Not talking points. Expertise. And it looks like holding on to the belief that this is governable. Because it is. The technology is not fate. The deployment decisions are choices. The governance frameworks are choices. The values embedded in the systems are choices. All of it is chosen by people, and all of it can be chosen differently. That is not optimism. It is a factual claim about the nature of the situation. The future of AI is not written. It is being written right now by the choices being made in boardrooms and legislatures and research labs and living rooms, including this one. We have spent 5 episodes taking apart an assumption. The assumption that intelligence requires the anatomy of man. That real minds look like ours. That the risk of AI is the risk of something that wants to replace us. What we have found instead is something more interesting and more demanding. Intelligence in nature is distributed, networked, non-centralized, and none of it needed to look human to be real. Intelligence in the enterprise is functional, efficient, and already reshaping the economic foundations of our world. Intelligence in our cultural imagination is monstrous and threatening, but the real threats are quieter, more structural, and more our own responsibility than any monster story would suggest. And the question of what AI owes us turns out to be, at its core, a question about what we owe each other. What obligations we are willing to take seriously. What kind of world we are willing to do the hard work of building. Next week is the series finale. Episode 6, Let Go of the Mirror. We are going to bring everything together. The philosophy, the biology, the economics, the ethics. And we are going to ask the final question, not what AI owes us, but what will the future we are building right now, with every deployment decision, every governance choice, every conversation we are willing or unwilling to have. It is the episode I have been building towards since episode 1. I think it is the most important piece of content I have made for this channel. And I cannot wait to share it with you. If this series has mattered to you, if these 5 episodes have given you language, or frameworks, or just the sense that someone is thinking carefully about something that deserves careful thought, please share episode 1 with someone who needs it. The conversation only grows if we grow it. Subscribe. Leave a comment below. I want to know which of the 5 questions from this episode feels most urgent to you personally. The one about accountability? The one about displaced workers? The one about data and community? Tell me. I read every comment. This is the Mango Report, AI edition. One more week. I'll see you for the finale.